Released in 1988, the 25th anniversary Countach was the final and ultimate version of the Countach, built to commemorate the 25th anniversary of Lamborghini. The Countach was the replacement of the Miura, and we do have another Countach in the game, so we're mainly going to focus on this special edition due to the ability to swap the Aventador engine into this vehicle. And then we'll take a look at the original Countach in a future video. Mechanically, the Anniversary Edition was very similar to the previous version of the Countach, known as the LP5000QV, but the driving characteristics were improved after some extensive testing. The styling was also updated by Horacio Pagani, who was working for Lamborghini at the time, after working his way up through the company. The size of the front bumpers and side skirts were increased and remained very angular, accentuating the wedge-shaped design of the Countach. These were not merely cosmetic upgrades, as they also helped with the aerodynamics of the vehicle and incorporated intake slots that fed cooling ducts for the brakes. The large rear radiator intake ducts were also modified, including slats, which was reminiscent of the Ferrari Testarossa, which was its main rival at the time. These two rivals were icons of the 80s, and both appeared. The radiator ducts in the rear of the car were also modified with vertical slats that were reminiscent of its main rival at the time, the Ferrari Testarossa, but these provided an aerodynamic advantage to force more air through the radiators, helping the cooling of the car. Taking a quick look at the interior of the original Countach, you can see they also updated the interior to modernize it. It was now equipped with power windows and a updated air conditioning system that was more efficient and actually offered climate control as well. Probably the most obvious addition to the car was the large rear bumper that extended out below the taillights. Although it did look a little bulkier, it ended up selling 657 units, only being outsold by the QV. While working on the anniversary car, Pagani had also been working on a one-off version of the Countach known as the Evoluzione, which was a testing ground for the Countach's eventual replacement, the Lamborghini Diablo. By 91, disagreements led Pagani to leave Lamborghini and start his own company in 1992. Let's head over to Tokyo and see how his car ended up doing on our lap. Let's first take a look at the 88 Countach with its stock setup. The performance points it ends up with fully built out is 752.81, with the horsepower ending up at 735 horsepower, and we ended up with 461 foot-pounds of torque. Now this is a naturally aspirated engine, so those numbers are very impressive. The overall weight of the vehicle ended up at 2,562 pounds, and even though the real-life counterpart had a top speed of 183 miles per hour, we were able to get up to 240 miles per hour on the test track. I do this after the downhill because I don't want to count the downhill slope. I just want to try to find a flat plane, and that's where we were able to achieve that speed. I used the second option for the rear wing on this car to give it the traditional Lamborghini Countach look, and although you could get more downforce by using the third option, it doesn't create the same appeal. And with the front and rear downforce maxed, this car is still plenty predictable while being very exciting to drive. I do believe there's a lot left on the table if you wanted to maximize performance, but this car is a lot of fun to drive in its current setup on both Spa and Le Mans, and the fun factor is worth more than getting the optimal lap time. The factory motor feels torquier than the engine swap, even though it's not, and we ended up getting pretty good wear on the tires. We ended up wearing about 10% out on the front and 20% on the rear, even though it did feel like it had a lot of torque. The overall fuel usage was right around 4 laps, so not great, but you can actually extend that out through using the fuel maps. We ended up getting a lap time of 1 minute 55 seconds, .716. Let's go ahead and see how the engine swap version holds up in comparison. The Countach with the Aventador motor feels very similar, and a lot of that is because it doesn't actually change the weight of the vehicle at all. It ends up picking up another 34 performance points, which brings it up to 787.21, and ends up picking up 281 horsepower and 134 foot-pounds of torque. That brings the total to 1,016 horsepower and 595 foot-pounds of torque. And I do think the reason the other car feels a little torqueier is just because of the comparison between the horsepower and the torque. This one picks up a lot more horsepower without picking up so much torque. The top speed picked up around 22 miles per hour, and that brought it to 262 miles per hour on the test track. None of these changes are that dramatic, other than the horsepower went up pretty significantly, but the car itself feels extremely similar to the stock variant. The tire wear also remained pretty much unchanged, with the front wearing at about 10% and the rears wearing at 20%. But the fuel usage was a little bit worse in this car, and we were only able to get 3 laps out of it. Again, the car doesn't feel too planted, but that just makes it feel exciting to drive. And when you take it out to either Spa or Le Mans, you detune the car for Le Mans, and then either track, if you just bring the fuel map to the more efficient settings, it has plenty of power, even in a naturally aspirated setup, to crush the competition, and that solves the fuel issue. We ended up crossing the line with this car at 1 minute 51 seconds, .774. So right around 4 seconds quicker, and other than on paper, you really don't notice too much of a difference in the feel of the car. So I'd say in terms of engine swaps, that's a very successful swap. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you made it this far, and we'll make sure that you stay tuned in for future content.